Did Danner finally do it? Is this a real pair of Danner mountain boots? Nope, these are Dundas. But I love Danner boots because their mountain boots are some of the most iconic boots of all time. But unfortunately, after we cut every single one of them in half, they really don't make them like they used to. And they're a lot more of a modern boot for a more modern consumer, and they're really just a shadow of their former selves, which is understandable to some degree. So when I heard that a little brand in Europe called Dundas was making a very true heritage mountain boot, my interest was piqued. So we got a pair, we're gonna cut them in half, run through all of our tests to really figure out, are they actually built like they used to be built? Are they actually better than the Danners? Why would you want this boot over the Danners? And why some people are at the end of this video, they're still gonna want a pair of Danners over these Dundases. And ultimately, is this mountain boot worth the price? Because they are not cheap. FlexiSpot is the one brand in the standing desk and just desk industry generally you can actually trust. Because we've bought the cheap Walmart ones, we bought the cheap Amazon ones, and we've seen the difference in quality because now we've basically moved the whole business to FlexiSpot desk while still having a couple of those cheap ones around, and there's a very distinct difference. Because I'm gonna show you some of the tests they asked me to run, which I think is so cool, the difference between the two. Because FlexiSpot can hold 540 pounds, at least at static capacity. They have 3-leg versions, 2-leg versions, and a 4-leg solid stability version that I really want. So test number 1, the wobble test, will show you the difference of how little it wobbles as at the different heights and while it's moving. Test number 2 is the cup of water test to show you how stable it is. Even if you fill your cup to the max, it's not gonna spill. And then test number 3 is the one that I did not believe was actually gonna work. It's the coin test. We put a coin on its edge, standing up, and raise the desk and it doesn't fall over. And FlexiSpot provides all kinds of standing desks and ergonomic chairs to meet your demands. If you want the premium experience, you can order the E7 Pro standing desks that we have a few of. If you really want to go hard and you really want that stability and you want to do some crafts or you just have a lot of weight or whatever reason you want some extra stability, check out the E7 Plus standing desk with the 4 legs. And for the times that you're not standing, they also have the comfortable ergonomic chairs with flexible adjustments for your back. And if you use my promo code YTE7P50, you get $50 off their premium desk. So check them out below, and thanks again to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this video. And in order to really understand this boot, you kind of have to understand the history of mountaineering, which goes back a shockingly long time, because true modern mountaineering is considered to start around when the first ascent of Mont Blanc by Jacques Balmat and Michael Gabriel Picard in 1786. And so you can understand in the 1700s, their equipment was very, very basic. Handmade leather boots, wool clothes, wooden ice axes, walking sticks, or literally just sticks. And at the time, it was not a leisure activity. It was more of a scientific endeavor to understand the geology, the botanicals, the every aspect of these super tall mountains that not a lot of people had ever been to. But fast forward to roughly 100 years, from 1854 to 1865, it's considered the golden age of alpinism. And with the true start of this golden era being marked by the first ascent of the Wetterhorn in 1854, followed by the first ascent of all of these. But you might expect the effect of that would be nobody wants to go climb mountains anymore, but it had the opposite effect, because mountaineering and hiking went from this fringe pursuit for rich people to a symbol of human determination and conquest. Then fast forward to the 1900s, before World War I and World War II, the first attempt was unsuccessful at Everest, but then in the outbreak of World War I, but especially World War II, a lot of those boots, as we've seen from cutting them in half, were heavily inspired by mountaineering boots, because a lot of the innovation in mountaineering went through the military. Then you pop out the other end of World War II in the 50s, mountaineering started to really become popular again, because all the technology of World War II really revitalized this concept of climbing mountains, the pursuit to climb the highest peaks on Earth. In response to that, in 1960, Danner launches the mountain trail boot aimed at serious hikers and outdoorsmen, known for its stitched down construction and full grain leather upper, Vibram outsole, leather midsole, insole. This was about as beefy and heavy duty and high quality a boot that Danner made for mountaineering. Because of that, it was hugely popular. You look at all those old hiking and climbing magazines from the 70s, 80s, and even up to the 90s, everyone was wearing a pair of these Danners. And with good reason, because they were originally designed to be mountaineering boots with the hole cut style, with all the different things that used to be in Danners that are no longer. Because over the years leading up to the 90s, as consumers were no longer looking for true mountaineering boots. They wanted the look of mountaineering boots. They wanted the idea of a mountaineering boot, but without all the complications of breaking in a really heavy, stiff boot. So at some point, I'm guessing during the 90s or 2000s, that's when they stopped making these boots like true mountaineering boots and opened up the opportunity for brands like Dundas to make that boot. So what is this boot? Well, the brand is Dundas. The style is the Lille Bjorn in onyx. They weigh 2 pounds, 4 ounces, which is pretty heavy. They retail for around 530 USD. They're made in Austria. So if you do want a pair of these, check them out. The links in my description. I'll also put Danner links below, because like I mentioned at the end of this video, you might still want a pair of Danners. So now let's start looking at the details, starting with this Battle-Lassie leather. This tannery is so cool. It's a really old tannery. They can date some of their methods and their formulas and their tannery over 100 years, and they're known for making some of the highest quality Italian veg tan that you can buy. And it has a really cool texture and feel to it. I thought maybe it was a top coat, but we burned it and it didn't really like burn off like it was a plastic top coat or anything. I think what it is it's just like almost like a waxed flesh, but it's almost like a waxed nubuck. So that's where you kind of get that matte sheen with some of the characteristics there that are really unique. It's 2.3 millimeters thick. We look at the cross section, plenty of grain left in it. We did the burn test and it kind of looks like magma. So I think it's because it's a fairly dry leather, but it almost acts like wood when it's burning. But that is one of the downsides of this leather. It is stiff and it is hard. It's not the hardest leather out there, but it is veg tan. So this will not be an easy break-in compared to, you know, like the softer leathers that Danner uses that are significantly more malleable, and just a straight chrome tan leather. It's probably not gonna be quite as durable. It's not gonna give you the same amount of support, but it's gonna be way easier to break in than this leather. But more importantly, the thing about the uppers, I like that this is truly a mountaineering boot, because you can see the way this tongue is set up, it has Velcro on the inside. And so the idea is you pull that tongue up, you can cinch that first flap down to roughly where you want it, and then this overlaying flap gets cinched down, the whole thing cinches around your foot. And what that does is it gives you lots of support. It prevents water and dirt and grime from getting on the inside of your boot, because it has to kind of go through a zigzag pattern to get to the inside. It can also be more durable because instead of all those stitch lines coming through here, it's just riveted straight to the leather, and it has a lot of overlapping layers that you're gonna have to wear through, like 3 layers to wear through it. And in the vamp, it's a single piece of leather that wraps around the entirety of the vamp. Versus the Danners, this is more of a true hole cut version of a mountain boot, where it's the same concept where you remove any fell points by removing stitch lines and panels overlapping by just doing a hole cut boot. And that's part of why these, even though they're not like straight heritage quality and leather, everything, they're still a pricey boot, because that's like a big piece of leather. They have to take a 2-dimensional flat sheet and shape it into a 3D boot at scale for Danner. But that is one thing you could point to say that the Danners are better in a way, because this has 3 panels rather than just one wrapped around panel. Then you look at the inside, and that was the one thing I was trying to find, at least one Danner boot that was fully leather lined. And I think we found one, but then like the lining of the forefoot was just like you're standing on like open cell foam, whereas these Dundas boots are fully leather lined. It's around standard thickness, like 1.2 to 1.5 millimeters thick. And the inside kind of mirrors the outside, because this heel area is one single piece of leather. And so there's no seams to fell. There's a seam that goes right through here where that junction is on the outside as well. And then same thing at the vamp. It's just one single piece of leather. And so what that does is removes any hard stitch points that you're gonna wear on your toes or your foot, removes any potential fell points, and just makes it a lot more comfortable, especially with this padding in the collar. Then you look at the insole. It's a pretty unique insole. You know, Danner had a bunch of different random things going on in their insoles. They weren't terrible, but this one's really unique. This is like a felted material in the forefoot that I think runs through the whole insole, and then in the heel you've got this rubber and cork infused supportive area. Then on top you have a suede leather. So you got that breathability and that sweat reduction, that grip of the leather. You get the support of that rubbery cork-filled stuff with the squish of that felted material that's not gonna wear out like foam will or deaden like foam will. And then underneath of it, you can see that is one big slab of veg tan leather, which was another thing I was just hoping. I was like, one of these Danner boots has to have at least one leather midsole or one leather insole somewhere. But unfortunately, none of them really did. And another thing that's different about this boot is the midsole. You can see on the outside, you've got a full-length veg tan midsole and a full-length red rubber midsole. And the reason they did this in the historical boots is that really thick veg tan gives you more stability. It's more material to bend, and when you're hiking up mountains, you don't want these boots to bend. And so they make it super rigid so that you distribute more of that flexing. Instead of just your calves, you're using the entirety of your foot, your entirety of your leg. Whereas the Danners, they're still stiff. You know, they're still gonna give you support if you're doing some light hike, but they're not nearly as stiff as a true mountaineering boots. And so once again, that's another downside of this, is if you're wanting to wear these casually, they're gonna be clompers. It's gonna take a long time to get any kind of flex, and you're never gonna get the same amount of flex as a regular boot. For a mountaineering boot, they're perfect. That's exactly what you need though. And then finally to the outsole, you got that classic Vibram outsole. This is the Montagna. This is one of the most famous styles of outsoles because it's super grippy, heavy lugs. It lasts a really long time because it's a pretty tough rubber. It's 80 Shore A. You know, most sneaker rubber you see down like the 60s, work boot leather you see around 75. So this is a tough, rugged outsole. And that's why when we did the puncture test, it took 354 pounds to puncture through, number 8 of all boots. And that's because they have to make this so rigid and build up so many layers that you can't just accidentally overflex this boot. So now let's cut this thing in half and I'll show you the main difference on how these two boots are constructed because they look similar, but they're vastly different. It's our scratch and knit sale, 30% off. So I wanted to show you what a scratch and knit wallet looks like. So nothing actually wrong with this wallet except for the mismatching color slightly. Just small cosmetic flaws. And if anything, that makes them more unique and more original. And plus, within the first week, they're gonna be more beat up than any scratch and knit product we sell anyway. So check it out below, 30% off while supplies last. Scratch and knit sale. All right, we got these $500+ boots cut in half. And if you're not subscribed, consider pushing the little subscribe button, give this video a like, because that's how we afford to buy this stuff to show you exactly what you're spending your hard-earned money on, instead of just gambling and assuming that a mountain boot means it's made for the mountains, when in all reality, half of the mountain boots are more casual boots. So now let's see what's inside. There's actually less leather than I thought on the inside. You know, these are so rigid that I thought for sure there's like tons of layers, but what really gives this boot the rigidity that you can't see from the outside is there's a full length shank running the entirety of the boot. So you have 2 layers of thick veg tan leather and 2 layers of a harder rubber or plastic that acts as that stiffening board. Because even with it cut in half, that's about as far as I can flex it. Compared to JK Super Duty, that's probably even thicker. See how much easier that is to bend? And I think that all comes from those 2 layers of that harder material. And now you can really see what I meant with that lining being a seamless lining in the heel and 1 layer right here in the toe. And as for the heel counter, they use a leather board counter, which is pretty common in boots from like the $300 to $500 range, because it's a little bit softer, breaks in a little bit faster than veg tan, but I thought for sure it'd be veg tan if I'm being honest. And what's cool now it's cut in half, you can really see how all these layers overlap and how they all work together. It almost has its own independent tongue and then 2 layers overlap it. So then what is Norwegian welt? Really all it is they take that upper of the boot and instead of tucking it under like a Goodyear welt or tucking it under like a board last, they just flare it out and then they stitch it directly down to the midsole. And so what that does is it makes it really water resistant, dirt resistant, because there's nothing really being tucked in anywhere. There's no holes to the inside. It's all external stitching. You compare that to the Dundas boots and you can see there is what looks like a stitch down stitch running around the perimeter, but then you also see this big sidewall stitch. And the way this works is almost like it combines a Goodyear welt with a stitch down construction, because this flat stitch acts like a stitch down stitch where it's sewn through the upper that's flared out, down through the midsole, even down through that red midsole even. And then that sidewall stitch acts like a Goodyear welt stitch where that ties the upper down to the insole where it ties in right underneath the insole. And so it kind of combines the best of the Goodyear welt construction with the best of the stitch down construction, which for a mountaineering boot is perfect because you have all the water resistance, the dirt resistance from all the material being flared out, but then you also have the durability and that tied in effect of having that sidewall stitch from a Goodyear welt construction without all the redundancies and all the internal stitching and all the extra bulk that comes from a Goodyear welt construction, while still being able to utilize that gap caused by that gimming underneath. Instead of filling it with cork, they just put that full length shank all the way through to give it all that rigidity, that stiffness. So it's actually a really brilliant way of making a mountain boot. And it worked. Like I said, this is the first time we've ever cut apart a Norwegian welt. And I love it. I fucking want it. So a lot of times you only see these really old school ways of making boots done through small brands who are reviving these old school way of doing things, bringing back the true mountaineering boot style to the boot market, and that's exactly what these are. So are they really built like they used to be? I think they are. I think it's at least closer. I think there might be some more synthetics and a few differences here and there, but they're definitely more true to a mountaineering boot than what Danner makes now. Are they better than Danner's? I think they are across the board. They're significantly better materials, better construction techniques, more durability. So they're better in terms of straight quality of materials. But like I mentioned, these are gonna be so hard to break in. They're gonna be really, really stiff for the first few months to get some of that toe flex. And they really are a purpose-built boot for the mountains. They're not a casual boot that you can hike in like the Danners are. So ultimately, is it worth the price of $500+? I think it is. I think that everything you see on the inside points to it being a really high quality boot, especially for the size of the company and the quantities they're doing, and for the demand for a true mountain boot. I think it's right within the right ballpark. I still think there's some things you could say that they could improve, like maybe the counter, maybe like a little thicker insole, you know, some things here and there that you can kind of be nitpicky at, but for the most part, I think they're priced well. So let me know what you think. Would you rather have a pair of Danners that are kind of a hybrid mountain boot or a true heavy duty mountain boot? Because honestly, the price difference is not as much as you might think. So let me know, and thank you guys for watching this. Check out the Dundas boots below. Let me know what other mountain boots you want us to cut in half. And if there's somebody out there that makes a true mountain boot like this, let me know, because it'd be cool to do like an old school mountaineering, like hiking boot series. So thank you guys. See ya.